Check, 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 check. In 19th centuries, there's check, 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 check.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is March 30th, 2026, about 8:45 p.m. where I'm at right now, and we are continuing our 20th book in our Book to React series. This is episode 15 of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. For today's episode, we will be reading chapters 20 and 21, picking up where our main character left off, where he got some coochie, finally, after getting kicked out of the Harlem Association of the Brotherhood, getting sent downtown to lecture to rich white women about the women issue and women's rights. And he ended up laying up with this white woman who gave him some coochie while her husband watched in a corner. Of course, that has to happen. The white man is obsessed with big black penis. And shout out to YouTuber 13S6YZ up in the live stream chat as well. I will be giving a shout out to everybody who tunes into the live stream. I am not doing well, YouTuber. I am sick right now. I think I'm coming down with a cold, and I'm sorry to everybody who's going to be tuning into this live stream today. And they are expecting me to be able to read, speak fluently and confidently with my full-throated, loud voice like I always do. But unfortunately, I might not be able to do that today. There might be several interruptions because of my nasal congestion. But I want to give a shout out to you. Thank you for joining. And shout out to everybody else who's going to join as well. Woo, it's coming on. Woo, it's coming on. Oh, I hate that. Oh, I hate that. Oh. But I really do believe in sharing and reading and educating the people. I really do believe in the work I do here. So even though I'm sick, the same way I never missed a day of school even when I was sick, I never miss a day of work even though I'm sick, I am not going to miss the opportunity to come on live and share great literature with the people and learning and everything like that. So shout out to YouTuber for joining. We're going to try to get through this, though, as quickly as possible, though, because I don't want to torture you all with my incessant sneezing. And, I want to try to recover as quickly as I can. So shout out to everybody who's going to sub, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Let's get into it now, picking up where we left off. Chapter 20 of Invisible Man. Okay? All right, YouTuber wants to be a moderator. Okay, you can be a moderator. Why not? All right. So all I ask of moderators, by the way, is that you block people. No, do not block anybody, YouTuber. Please just put them in timeout, okay? Timeout for as long as you want, whether that be 1 minute or whether that be, a whole day. I don't care. But please do not block anybody. If anybody comes in here being racist, sexist, xenophobic, discriminatory, you're welcome to block them out. Troll comments are okay. People just making jokes like, oh, I sniffed between my legs today and ooh-wee. Like, let that slide, you know what I mean? But all the other negative isms, we want to make this a happy and safe place for people to join in and read this book. So, all right. Without further ado, let's get into Chapter 20 of Invisible Man. I had been away long enough for the streets to seem strange. The uptown rhythms were slower and yet were somehow faster. A different tension was in the hot night air. I made my way through the summer crowds, not to the district, but to Barrel House's Jolly Dollar, a dark hole of a bar and a grill on Upper 8th Avenue, where one of my best contacts, Brother Maceo, could usually be found about this time, having his evening's beer. Looking through the window, I could see men in working clothes and a few rummy women leaning at the bar, and down the aisle between the bar and counter were a couple of men in black and blue checked sports shirts eating barbecue. A cluster of men and women hovered near the jukebox at the rear, but when I went in, Brother Maceo wasn't among them, and I pushed to the bar, deciding to wait for over a beer. "Good evening, brothers," I said, finding myself beside two men whom I had seen around before, only to have them look at me oddly, the eyebrows of the tall one raising at a drunken angle as he looked at the other. "Shit," the tall man said. "You said it, man. He's a relative of yourn? Shit, he goddamn sure ain't no kin of mine." I turned and looked at them, the room suddenly cloudy. "He must be drunk," the second man said. "Maybe he thinks he's kin to you. Then his whiskey's telling him a damn lie. I wouldn't be his kin even if I was. Hey, Barrel House." I moved away down the bar, looking at them out of a feeling of suspense. They didn't sound drunk, and I had said nothing to offend, and I was certain that they knew who I was. What was it? The Brotherhood? Greeting was as familiar as "give me some skin" or "peace, it's wonderful." I saw Barrel House rolling down from the other end of the bar, his white apron I indented by the tension of its cord, so that he looked like that kind of metal beer barrel which was a groove around its middle, and seeing me now, he began to smile. All right. So, shout out to everybody up in the chat. All right. Raw556 is an example YouTuber of somebody that you need to block. Okay. I will show you. You know, somebody that comes in here being racist, we don't allow that on this channel. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. But continuing here. "Well, I'll be damned if it ain't the good brother," he said, stretching out his hand. "Brother, where you been keeping yourself?" "I've been working downtown," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude. Fine, Barrel House said. "Business good? I'd rather not discuss it, brother. Business is bad. Very bad. I'm sorry to hear it. You better give me a beer," I said. "After you've served these gentlemen." I watched them in the mirror. "Sure thing," Barrel House said, reaching for a glass and drawing a beer. "What you putting down, old man?" he said to the tall man. "Look here, Barrel, we wanted to ask you one question," the tall one said. "We just wanted to know if you could tell us just whose brother this here's cat's supposed to be. He come in here just now calling everybody brother." "He's my brother," Barrel said, holding the foaming glass between his long fingers. "Anything wrong with that?" "Look, fellow," I said down the bar, "that's our way of speaking. I meant no harm in calling you brother. I'm sorry you misunderstood me." "Brother, here's your beer," Barrel House said. "So he's your brother, eh, Barrel?" Barrel's eyes narrowed as he pressed his huge chest across the bar, looking suddenly sad. "You enjoying yourself, McAdams?" he said gloomily. "You like your beer?" "Sho, McAdams said. "It's cold enough?" "It sure is. But Barrel, you like the groovy music on the juke?" Barrel House said. "Yeah, hell yeah, but..." "And you act like our good, clean, sociable... And you like our good, clean, sociable atmosphere?" "I sure do, but that ain't what I'm talking about," the man said. "Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about," Barrel House said mournfully. "And if you like it, and don't start trying to bug my other customers." "And if you like it, and don't start trying to bug my other customers. This here man's done more for the community than you'll ever do." "What community?" McAdams said, cutting his eyes around toward me. "I hear he got the white fever and left." "Ooh, okay, so I guess rumor went around town. That he's sleeping with that old white lady. I guess everybody know." "Ooh. You liable to hear anything," Barrel House said. "There's some paper back there in the gents' room. You ought to wipe out your ears." "Never mind my ears." "Oh, come on, Mac," his friend said. "Forget it. Ain't the man done apologized?" "I said never mind my ears," McAdams said. "You just tell your brother he ought to be careful about who he claims as kinfolks. Some of us don't think so much of his kind of politics." "I mean, I feel the same way. I don't like when anybody calls me brother." If you call me brother, I might look at you sideways. Sometimes I let it slip. Sometimes I let bro slip. But I really don't like being called brother because I don't like when white people steal black slang, particularly bro. You don't see me running around saying goy slop or mud shark. You don't hear me saying the white terms. You know what I mean? 3 a.m. Spicy Chicken says, why not brother? I don't like it. Number one, I only have one brother, a real blood brother, and you are not him. Secondly, I've seen people say, what up, bro? And then next thing you know, fa. You know what I mean? So the word brother, don't mean nothing. Somebody could be saying bro while they beating your ass. You know what I mean? And secondly, how are you going to say bro and then be an anti-black racist, which is the majority? I know a comment on my channel is going to be racist and it's written by a white person if it starts off with bro and then an excuse for racism and then a racist ending to that same comment. So that's why I don't like being called bro. You know what I mean? But I digress. Okay? All right. I looked from one to the other. I considered myself beyond the stage of street fighting, and one of the worst things I could do upon returning to the community was to engage in a brawl. I looked at McAdams and was glad when the other man pushed him down the bar. That McAdams thinks he's right, Barrelhouse said. He's the kind can't nobody please. Be frank though, there's lots feel like that now. I shook my head in bafflement. I'd never met that kind of antagonism before. What's happened to Brother Maceo? I said. I don't know, brother. He don't come in so regular these days. Things are kind of changing up here. Ain't much money floating around. Times are hard everywhere. But what's been going on up here, Beryl? I said. Oh, you know how it is, brother. Things are tight and lots of folks who got jobs through you people have lost them. You know how it goes. You mean people in our organization? Quite a few of them are. Fellows like Brother Maceo. But why? They were doing all right. Sure they was, as long as you people was fighting for them. But the minute y'all stopped, they started throwing folks out on the street. I looked at him big and sincere before me. It was unbelievable that the Brotherhood had stopped its work, and yet he wasn't lying. Give me another beer, I said. Then someone called him from the back, and he drew the beer and left. I drank it slowly, hoping Brother Maceo would appear before I had finished. When he didn't, I waved to Barrelhouse and left for the district. Perhaps Brother Tarp could explain, or at least tell me something about Clifton. I walked through the dark block over to 7th and started down. Things were beginning to look serious. Along the way, I saw not a single sign of Brotherhood activity. In a hot side street, I came upon a couple striking matches along the curb, kneeling as though looking for a lost coin, the matches flaring dimly in their faces. Then I found myself in a strangely familiar block and broke out in a sweat. I had walked almost to Mary's door and turned now and hurried away. Okay, so shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Shout out to Tensive. How are you? All right, and yeah, I see that 3 a.m. Spicy Chicken is insisting that I'm a racist. I don't hate anybody. I don't have any ill will towards any racial group of people at all. As a socialist, a communist, a leftist in general, I advocate for the rights of all people. Now, I'm sure if you ask 3 a.m. Spicy Chicken if he was a racist, he would say no. And he would probably point to his few black friends or whatever rap music he listens to alleviate his white guilt. But I'm not a racist. I could never be a racist of any type. I can never be a racist of any type. Acty! Come here.
What?
I want to kiss you.
Okay, wait, let me fix my titty.
I want to kiss you.
What happened?
Could I be a racist? Could I be a racist by kissing this beautiful Nubian queen? Ain't that right? Ain't that right? I could never be a racist. But because of that 3 a.m. Spicy Chicken and your trolling, your racist trolling, all right, we're going to block you. We are going to put you in timeout, okay? Sorry, 3 a.m. Spicy Chicken. That's just... You're just not a person intellectually suited to be around us high-class intellectuals, okay? Anyway, let's continue here. Barrelhouse had prepared me for the darkened windows of the district, but not when I let myself in, to call in vain through the dark to Brother Tarp. I went to the room where he slept, but he was not there. Then I went through the dark hall to my old office and threw myself into my desk chair exhausted. Everything seemed to be slipping away from me, and I could find no quick absorbing action that would get it under control. I tried to think of whom among the district committee I might call for information concerning Clifton, but here again I was balked. For if I selected one who believed that I had requested to be transferred because I hated my own people, it would only complicate matters. No doubt there would be some who'd resented my return, so it was best to confront them all at once without giving any one of them the opportunity to organize any sentiment against me. It was best that I talk with Brother Tarp, whom I trusted. When he came in, he could give me an idea of the state of affairs and perhaps tell me what had actually happened to Clifton. All right, so shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Once again, I've got a lot of people. Shout out to Kamal up in the live stream. I appreciate y'all joining. For real, for real. Okay? All right, Tensive. If you click the top of the video, you can see the video description. From the video description, it explains what we are doing here. But Brother Tarp didn't arrive. I went out and got a container of coffee and returned to spend the night poring over the district's records. When he had it returned by 3 a.m., I went to his room and took a look around. It was empty. Even the bed was gone. I'm all alone, I thought. A lot had occurred about which I wasn't told. Something that had not only stifled the members' interest, but which, according to the records, had sent them away in droves. Barrel House had said that the organization had quit fighting, and that was the only explanation I could find in Brother Tarp's leaving. Unless, of course, he'd had disagreements with Clifton or some of the other leaders. And now, returning to my desk, I noticed his gift of Douglas's portrait was gone. I felt in my pocket for the leg chain. At least I hadn't forgotten to take that along. I pushed the records aside. They told me nothing of why things were as they were. Picking up the telephone, I called Clifton's number, hearing it ring on and on. Finally, I gave it up and went to sleep in my chair. Everything had to wait until the strategy meeting. Returning to the district was like returning to a city of the dead. Kind of sad, you know? It's kind of sad that he showed up in Harlem and everything sort of changed. The old black man who was a longtime member of the party is gone. Everybody sort of dissipated and disappeared. And it's sort of like a little mystery. I like this little mystery in this book. Okay? All right. Continuing here. Somewhat to my surprise, there were a good number of members in the hall when I awoke. And having no directives from the committee on how to proceed, I organized them into teams to search for Brother Clifton. Not one could give me any definite information. Brother Clifton had appeared at the district as usual up to the time of his disappearance. There had been no quarrels with committee members, and he was as popular as ever. Nor had there been any clashes with Ras the Exhorter, although in the past week he had been increasingly active. As for the loss of membership and influence, it was a result of a new program which had called for the shelving of our old techniques of agitation. There had been, to my surprise, a switch in emphasis from local issues to those more national and international in scope, and it was felt that for the moment the interests of Harlem were not of first importance. I didn't know what to make of it, since there had been no such change of program downtown. Clifton was forgotten. Everything which I was to do now seemed to depend upon getting an explanation from the committee, and I waited with growing agitation to be called to the strategy meeting. Such meetings were usually held around 1 o'clock, and we were notified well ahead. But by 11:30 I had received no word, and I became worried. By 12, an uneasy sense of isolation took hold of me. Something was cooking, but what, how, and why? Finally, I phoned headquarters, but could reach none of the leaders. What is this, I wondered. Then I called the leaders of other districts with the same results, and now I was certain that the meeting was being held. But why without me? Had they investigated Restrom's charges and decided it seemed that the membership had fallen off after I had gone downtown? Or was it the woman? Whatever it was, now was not the time to leave me out of a meeting. Things were too urgent in the district. I hurried down to headquarters. When I arrived, the meeting was in session, just as I expected, and word had been left that it was not to be disturbed by anyone. It was obvious that they hadn't forgotten to notify me. When I arrived, the meeting was in session, just as I expected, and word had been left that it was not to be disturbed by anyone. It was obvious that they hadn't forgotten to notify me. I left the building in a rage. Very well, I thought. When they do decide to call me, they'll have to find me. I should never have been shifted in the first place. And now that I was sent back to clean up the mess, they should aid me as quickly as possible. I would do no more running downtown, nor would I accept any program that they sent up without consulting the Harlem committee. Then I decided of all things to shop for a pair of new shoes, and I walked over to Fifth Avenue. It was hot, the walks still filled with noontime crowds moving with reluctance back to their jobs. I moved along close to the curb to avoid the bumping and agitated changes of pace, the chattering women in summer dresses, finally entering the leather-smelling, air-cooled interior of the shoe store with a sense of relief. My feet felt light in the new summer shoes as I went back to the blazing heat, and I recalled the old boyhood pleasure of discarding winter shoes for sneakers and the neighborhood foot races that always followed that light-footed, speedy, floating sensation. Well, I thought, you've run your last foot race, and you better get back to the district in case you're called. I hurried now, my feet feeling trim and light, as I moved through the oncoming rush of sun-beaten faces. To avoid the crowd on 42nd Street, I turned off at 43rd, and it was here that things began to boil. Okay. Shout out to everybody up in the chats as well. Shout out to Tensive. Shout out to YouTuber. And shout out to Azealia Lumpa. Okay. All right. And yeah. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Okay. Yeah, let's continue here. All right. A small fruit wagon with an array of bright peaches and pears stood near the curb, and the vendor, a florid man with bulbous nose and bright black Italian eyes, looked at me knowingly from beneath his huge white and orange umbrella, then over toward a crowd that had formed alongside the building across the street. What's wrong with him, I thought. Then I was across the street and passing the group, standing with their backs to me. A clipped, insinuating voice spilled words whose meaning I couldn't catch, and I was about to pass on when I saw the boy. He was a slender brown fellow whom I recognized immediately as a close friend of Clifton's, and who now was looking intently across the tops of cars to where down the block near the post office on the other side a tall policeman was approaching. Perhaps he'll know something, I thought, as he looked around to see me and stopped in confusion. Okay? Hello there, I began, and when he turned toward the crowd and whistled, I didn't know whether he was telling me to do the same or signaling to someone else. All right, so Tensive is in the comments saying, please talk about politics. Well, you have to ask a question. You have to ask a political, pertinent question to get an answer. And yeah, guys, if you want to have an engaging, intellectual, fun conversation, we can do that. But just spamming the same question over and over again will not get you far. You know what I mean? So let's continue here. I swung around, seeing him step to where a large carton sat beside the building and sling its canvas straps to his shoulder as once more he looked toward the policeman, ignoring me. Puzzled, I moved into the crowd and pressed to the front, where at my feet I saw a square piece of cardboard upon which something was moving with furious action. It was some kind of toy, and I glanced at the crowd's fascinated eyes and down again, seeing it clearly this time. I'd seen nothing like it before. A grinning doll of orange and black tissue paper with thin, flat cardboard discs forming its head and feet, and which some mysterious mechanism was causing to move up and down in a loose-jointed, shoulder-shaking, infuriatingly sensuous manner. A dance that was completely detached from the black mask-like face. It's no jumping jack, but what I thought, seeing the doll throwing itself about with the fierce defiance of someone performing a degrading act in public, dancing as though it received a perverse pleasure from its motions. And beneath the chuckles of the crowd, I could hear the swishing of its ruffled paper, while the same out of the corner of the mouth voice continued to spiel. Shake it up. He's Sambo and dancing doll, ladies and gentlemen. Shake him, stretch him by the neck and set him down. He'll do the rest. Yes, he'll make you laugh. He'll make you sigh. And he'll make you want to dance and dance. Here you are, ladies and gentlemen, Sambo, the dancing doll. Buy one for your baby. Take him to your girlfriend and she'll love you. Love you. He'll keep you entertained. He'll make you weep sweet tears from laughing. Shake him, you cannot break him. For he's Sambo, the dancing Sambo, the prancing Sambo, the entrancing Sambo, Sambo boogie woogie paper doll. And all for 25 cents, the quarter part of $1. Ladies and gentlemen, he'll bring you joy. Step up and meet him. Sambo the... I knew I should get back to the district, but I was held by the inanimate, boneless bouncing of the grinning doll, and struggled between the desire to join in the laughter and to leap upon it with both feet. When it suddenly collapsed, and I saw the tip of the spieler's toe press down the circular cardboard that formed the feet, and a broad black hand come down. Its fingers deftly lifting the doll's head and stretching it upward, twice its length, then releasing it to dance again. And suddenly the voice didn't go with the hand. It was as though I had waded out into a shallow pool, only to have the bottom drop out and the water close over my head. I looked up. Not you, I began. But his eyes looked past me deliberately, unseeing. I was paralyzed, looking at him, knowing I wasn't dreaming, hearing... What makes him happy? What makes him dance? This Sambo, this Jambo, this high-stepping joy boy. He's more than a toy, ladies and gentlemen. He's Sambo, the dancing doll, the 20th century miracle. Look at that Roomba, that's Susie Q. He's Sambo Boogie. Sambo Woogie. You don't have to feed him. He sleeps, collapsed. He'll kill your depression and your dispossession. He lives upon the sunshine of your lordly smile, and only 25 cents, the brotherly 2 bits of $1, because he wants to eat. It gives him pleasure to see me eat. You simply take him and shake him, and he does the rest. Thank you, lady. All right. Shout out to Tensive. Once again, please do not call me brother. Do not call me bro or brother. I do not appreciate that. Call me comrade. Call me Tovadish. Tovadish or comrade, or just Simon. You could just say Simon. Do I like Trump? Fuck Donald Trump. Anyway, it was continuing here. It was Clifton riding easily back and forth on his knees, flexing his legs without shifting his feet, his right shoulder raised at an ankle and his arm pointing stiffly at the bouncing doll as he spilled from the corner of his mouth. The whistle came again, and I saw him glance quickly toward his lookout, the boy with the carton. Okay, so Brother Clifton, the former radical that used to be throwing hands in the street against black nationalists, all for the sake of global revolution, is now selling the Sambo toy in the street? Crazy. All right, sorry. The whistle came again, and I saw him glance quickly toward his lookout, the boy with the carton. Who else wants little Sambo before we take it on the Lambo? Speak up, ladies and gentlemen. Who wants little? And again the whistle. Who wants Sambo, the dancing, prancing? Hurry, hurry, ladies and gentlemen. There's no license for little Sambo, the joy spreader. You can't tax joy, so speak up, ladies and gentlemen. For a second our eyes met, and he gave me a contemptuous smile. Then he spieled again. I felt betrayed. I looked at the doll and felt my throat constrict. The rage welled behind the phlegm as I rocked back on my heels and crouched forward. There was a flash of whiteness and splatter like heavy rain striking a newspaper, and I saw the doll go over backwards, wilting into a dripping rag of frilled tissue, the hateful head upturned on its outstretched neck, still grinning toward the sky. The crowd turned on me indignantly. The whistle came again. I saw a short, pot-bellied man look down, then up at me with amazement and explode with laughter. pointing from mocking. People backed away from me. I saw Clifton step closer to the building, where besides the fellow with the carton, I now saw a whole chorus line of dolls, flouncing themselves with a perverse increase of energy, and the crowd laughing hysterically. You, I began, only to see him pick up two of the dolls and step forward. But now the lookout came close. He's coming, he said, nodding toward the approaching policeman as he swept up the dolls, dropping them into the carton and starting away. Follow little Sambo around the corner, ladies and gentlemen, Clifton called. There's a great show coming up. It happened so fast that in a second only I and an old lady in blue polka dot dress were left. She looked at me, then back to the walk, smiling. I saw one of the dolls. I looked. She was still smiling, and I raised my foot to crush it, hearing her cry, "Oh no!" The policeman was just opposite, and I reached down instead, picking it up and walking off in the same motion. I examined it, strangely weightless in my hand, half expecting it to pulse with life. It was a still frill of paper. I dropped it in the pocket where I carried Brother Tarp's chain link and started after the vanished crowd. But I couldn't face Clifton again. I didn't want to see him. I might forget myself and attack him. I went in the other direction, towards 6th Avenue, past the policeman. What a way to find him, I thought. What had happened to Clifton? It was all so wrong, so unexpected. How on earth could he drop from Brotherhood to this in so short a time? And why, if he had to fall back, did he try to carry the whole structure with him? What would non-members who knew him say? It was as though he had chosen, how he had put it in the night he fought with Ross, to fall outside of history. I stopped in the middle of the walk with the thought. To plunge, he had said, but he knew that only in the Brotherhood could we make ourselves known. Could we avoid being empty Sambo dolls, such an obscene flouncing of everything human. My God, and I had been worrying about being left out of a meeting. I'd overlook it 1,000 times, no matter why I wasn't called. I'd forget it and I'd hold on desperately to Brotherhood with all my strength. For to break away would be to plunge. And those dolls, where had they found them? Why had he picked that way to earn a quarter? Why not sell apples or song sheets or shine shoes? Okay. All right. Tensive, I didn't see your question. Your question was, do I like Donald Trump? And I said, fuck Donald Trump. That's my answer to that question. Fuck Donald Trump. He's a pedophile, racist, insurrectionist, very unintelligent man. Very dumb. He's incredibly dumb. You know, I'm in Budapest, Hungary right now, and Donald Trump gave a speech where he said, I want to give thanks to the great man here. You probably know him. His name is Orban. He's the president of Turkey. Like, the man is an idiot. Okay? So, yeah. Fuck Donald Trump and fuck every MAGA supporter. You know, anybody who supports him is just as bad as him, in my opinion. Okay? So, yeah. I'm going to continue here. So, I wandered past the subway and continued around the corner to 42nd Street, my mind grappling for meaning. And when I came around the corner onto the crowded walk into the sun, they were already lining the curb and shading their faces with their hands. I saw the traffic moving with the lights, and across the street a few pedestrians were looking back toward the center of the block where the trees of Bryant Park rose above two men. I saw a flight of pigeons whirl out of the trees, and it all happened in the swift interval of their circling, very abruptly and in the noise of the traffic, yet seeming to unfold in my mind like a slow-motion movie run off with the soundtrack dead. At first, I thought it was a cop and a shoeshine boy. Then there was a break in the traffic, and across the sun-glaring bands of trolley rails, I recognized Clifton. His partner had disappeared now, and Clifton had the box slung to his left shoulder, with the cop moving slowly behind and to one side of him. They were coming my way, passing a newsstand, and I saw the rails and the asphalt and a fire plug at the curb and the flying birds, and thought, you'll have to follow and pay his fine, just as the cop pushed him, jolting him forward, and Clifton trying to keep the box from from swinging against his leg and saying something over his shoulder and going forward as one of the pigeons swung down into the street and up again, leaving a feather floating white in the dazzling backlight of the sun. And I could see the cop push Clifton again, stepping solidly forward in his black shirt, his arms shooting out stiffly, sending him in a head-snapping forward stumble until he caught himself, saying something over his shoulder again, the two moving in a kind of march that I'd seen many times, but never with anyone like Clifton. And I could see the cop bark a command and lunge forward, thrusting out his arm and missing, thrown off balance as suddenly Clifton spun on his toes like a dancer and swung his right arm over and around in a short, jolting arc, his torso carrying forward and to the left in a motion that sent the box strap free as his right foot traveled forward and his left arm followed through in a floating uppercut that sent the cop's cap sailing into the street and his feet flying to drop him hard, rocking from left to right on the walk as Clifton kicked the box thudding aside and crouched, his left foot forward, his hands high, waiting. And between the flashing of cars, I could see the cop propping himself on his elbows like a drunk, trying to get his head up, shaking it and thrusting it forward. And somewhere between the dull roar of traffic and the subway vibrating underground, I heard rapid explosions and saw each pigeon diving wildly as though blackjacked by the sound, and the cop sitting up straight now, rising to his knees, looking steadily at Clifton, and the pigeons plummeting swiftly into the trees, and Clifton still facing the cop and suddenly crumpling. Damn! Innocent man got murdered by the cops. Innocent man just shot by the cops. I hate the way Ralph Ellison writes the action scenes. I feel like his weakest ability as a writer is describing vivid action. Dialogue is great. Storytelling is great. Pacing is great. Character development is great. But the action scenes are just a bit garbled, you know what I mean? Because that scene when Clifton just got murdered by the cops, that should have been like just brief, staccato, and impactful punching, you know what I mean? So, yeah. So shout out to Geosphere69. Yeah, I am from Louisiana. We say this at the beginning of every live stream. Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Shout out to Tensive. He says, what's your political opinion on what? Okay? On what? You have to ask a question. You have to ask a question. Shout out to Spider767. Okay? I am a leftist, Tensive. I am a leftist. Okay? So, he fell forward on his knees like a man saying his prayers, just as a heavy-set man in a hat with a hat turned down, brim stepped from around the newsstand and yelled a protest. I couldn't move. The sun seemed to scream an inch above my head. Someone shouted. A few men were starting into the street. The cop was standing now and looking down at Clifton as though surprised, the gun in his hand. I took a step forward, walking blindly now, unthinking, yet my mind registering it all vividly. Across and starting up on the curb and seeing Clifton up closer now, lying in the same position on his side, a huge wetness growing on his shirt, and I couldn't set my foot down. Cars sailed close behind me, but I couldn't take the step that would raise me up to the walk. I stood there, one leg in the street and the other raised above the curb, hearing whistles screeching and looked toward the library to see two cops coming on in a lunging, big-bellied run. I looked back to Clifton. The cop was waving me away with his gun, sounding like a boy with a changing voice. Get back on the other side, he said. He was the cop that I'd passed on 43rd a few minutes before. My mouth was dry. He's a friend of mine. I want to help, I said, finally stepping upon the curb. He don't need no help, Junior. Get across the street. The cop's hair hung on the side of his face. His uniform was dirty, and I watched him without emotion, hesitated, hearing the sound of footfalls approaching. Everything seemed slowed down. A pull formed slowly on the walk. My eyes blurred. I raised my head. The cop looked at me curiously. Above in the park, I could hear the furious flapping of wings on my neck the pressure of eyes. I turned. A round-headed, apple-cheeked boy with a thickly freckled nose and Slavic eyes leaned over the fence of the park above, and now as he saw me turn, he shrilled something to someone behind me, his face lighting up with that to which I did not wish to turn. Wow. Wow. There were 3 cops now, one watching the crowd and the others looking at Clifton. The first cop had his cap on again. "Look, Junior," he said very clearly, "I had enough trouble for today. You going to get on across that street?" I opened my mouth, but nothing would come. Kneeling, one of the cops was examining Clifton and making notes on a pad. "I'm his friend," I said, and the one making notes looked up. And the one making notes looked up. Okay, sorry. I opened my mouth, but nothing would come. Kneeling, one of the cops was examining Clifton and making notes on a pad. "I'm his friend," I said, and the one making notes looked up. "He's a cooked pigeon, Mac," he said. "You ain't got any friend anymore. He's dead. They killed Clifton." Okay? Shout out to Geosphere. Okay? Yeah. We're going to keep on fighting for a much better future. Okay? So, continuing here. "Hey, Mickey," the boy above us called. "The guy's out cold." I looked down. "That's right," the kneeling cop said. "What's your name?" I told him. I answered his questions about Clifton as best as I could until the wagon came. For once it came quickly. I watched him nimbly as they moved him aside, placing the box of dolls in with him. Across the street, the crowd still churned. Then the wagon was gone, and I started back toward the subway. "Say, mister," the boy's voice shrilled down, "your friend sure knows how to use his dukes. Biff, bang, 1-2, and the cops on his ass." I bowed my head to his final tribute, and now walking away in the sun, I tried to erase the scene from my mind. See, that scene is so powerful. I feel like it could have been executed a bit differently, a bit more poignantly. But yeah, the fear of death by police officers is something that I think every black man lives with, especially in America. Okay? And the way this book just covered that by having the Black King killed, Clifton, Brother Clifton, the handsome black shining prince, murdered in the street by a cop like that. That was just sad. That's just incredibly sad. And I always think about my own life, how many times I could have been a hashtag by a racist-ass cop in Louisiana or Florida or Texas. You know what I'm saying? I always think about that. Anyway, Geosphere says, "What's your learning about Zionism?" The English of some of you is so bad. Some of you speak English so horribly, and it's so sad because this is explicitly an English channel. I fill out the content so that people know this is an English mostly content channel, and some of you just expose yourselves for either just being just horrible English as second language learners, okay? All right, what is your leaning about Zionism? That doesn't even make any sense either. What is your leaning about Zionism? That doesn't make any sense either. See, the English of some of you is really bad. But Zionism is a wicked ideology. I oppose all forms of nationalism. There shouldn't be Bangladesh for the Bangladeshis. There shouldn't be Sri Lanka for the Sri Lankans. There shouldn't be Uganda for the Ugandans. And there shouldn't be Israel for the Jews. Nation states are inherently wicked, evil, and divisive. I do not support language states, okay? So, yeah, I'm going to continue here. I wandered down the subway stairs, seeing nothing, my mind plunging. The subway was cool, and I leaned against a pillar, hearing the roar of trains passing across on the other side, feeling the rushing roar of air. Why should a man deliberately plunge outside of history and peddle an obscenity? My mind went on abstractly. Why should he choose to disarm himself, give up his voice, and leave the only organization offering him a chance to define himself? The platform vibrated, and I looked down. Bits of paper whirled up in the passage of air, settling quickly as a train moved past. Why had he turned away? Why had he chosen to step off the platform and fall beneath the train? Why did he choose to plunge into nothingness, into the void of faceless faces, of soundless voices, lying outside history? I tried to step away and look at it from a distance or of words read in books, half remembered. For history records the patterns of men's lives, they say. Who slept with whom and with what results? Who fought and who won and who lived to lie about it afterwards? All things, it is said, are duly recorded. All things of importance, that is, but not quite. For actually it is only the known, the seen, the heard, and only those events that the recorder regards as important that are put down. Those lies his keepers keep their power by. But the cop would be Clifton's historian, his judge, his witness, and his executioner, and I was the only brother in the watching crowd. And I, the only witness for the defense, knew neither the extent of his guilt nor the nature of his crime. Where were the historians today, and how would they put it down? I stood there with the trains plunging in and out, throwing blue sparks. What did they ever think of us transitory ones? Ones such as I had been before I found Brotherhood. Birds of passage who were too obscure for learned classification, too silent for the most sensitive recorders of sound, of natures too ambiguous for the most ambiguous words, and too distant from the centers of historical decision to sign or even to applaud the signers of historical documents. We who write no novels, histories of other books. What about us, I thought, seeing Clifton again in my mind and going to sit upon a bench as a cool gust of air rolled up the tunnel. A body of people came down the platform, and some of them Negroes. Yes, I thought, what about those of us who were shot up and down the subway, into the Biscuit City like wild jack-in-the-boxes, broken loose from our springs? So sudden that our gait becomes like that of deep-sea divers suffering from the bends. What about those fellows waiting still and silent there on the platform, so still and silent that they clash with the crowd in their very immobility, standing noisy in their very silence, harsh as a cry of terror in their quietness? What about those three boys coming now along the platform, tall and slender, walking stiffly with swinging shoulders in their well-pressed, not too hot for summer suits, their collars high and tight about their necks, their identical hats of black cheap felt set upon the crowns of their heads with a severe formality above their hard, conked hair? It was as though I'd never seen their like before. Walking slowly, their shoulders swaying, their legs swinging from their hips in trousers that ballooned upward from cuffs fitting snug above their ankles, their coats long and hip-tight, with shoulders far too broad to be those of natural Western men. These fellows, whose bodies seemed, what had one of my teachers said of me? You're like one of these African sculptures, distorted in the interest of a design. Well, what design and whose? I stared as they seemed to move like dancers in some kind of funeral ceremony, swaying, going forward, their black faces secret, moving slowly down the subway platform, their heavy-heeled plated shoes making a rhythmical tapping as they moved. Everyone must have seen them, or heard their muted laughter, or smelled the heavy pomade on their hair, or perhaps failed to see them at all, for they were men outside of historical time. They were untouched. They didn't believe in Brotherhood, no doubt had never heard of it, or perhaps like Clifton would mysteriously have rejected its mysteries, men of transition whose faces were immobile. I got up and went behind them. Women, shoppers with bundles and impatient men in straw hats and seersucker suits stood along the platform as they passed. And suddenly I found myself thinking, do they come to bury the others or to be entombed, to give life or to receive it? Do the others see them, think about them, even though standing close enough to speak? And if they spoke back, would the impatient businessmen in conventional suits and tired housewives with their plunder understand? What would they say? For the boys speak a jived-up transitional language full of country glamour, think transitional thoughts, though perhaps they dreamed the same old ancient dreams. They were men out of time, unless they found brotherhood, men out of time who would soon be gone and forgotten. But who knew? And now I began to tremble so violently I had to lean against a refuse can. Who knew but that they were the saviors, the true leaders, the bearers of something precious, the stewards of something uncomfortable, burdensome, which they hated because living outside the realm of history, there was no one to applaud their value, and they themselves failed to understand it. What if Brother Jack were wrong? What if history was a gambler instead of a force in a laboratory experiment, and the boys his ace in the hole? What if history was not a reasonable citizen, but a madman full of paranoid guile, and these boys his agents, his big surprise? His own revenge, for they were outside in the dark with Sambo, the dancing paper doll, taking it on the Lambo with my fallen brother, Tod Clifton. Tod. Running and dodging the forces of history instead of making a dominating stand. I might cry low-key. Dog, I gotta cry because this is deep. This is deep. There's a lot I gotta say. I might say it at the end of the chapter, man, but I might cry because this is too moving, low-key. But it's also because I'm a bit sick, too. So it's a mix of everything. Damn, I didn't know chapter 20 was so emotional. I can't believe I forgot all of this after reading all this before. Anyway, a train came. I followed them inside. There were many seats, and the three sat together. I stood holding on to the center pole, looking down the length of the car. On one side, I saw a white nun in black, telling her beads, and standing before the door across the aisle, there was another dressed completely in white, the exact duplicate of the other, except that she was black and her black feet bare. Neither of the nuns was looking at the other, but at their crucifixes, and suddenly I laughed, and a verse I'd heard long ago at the Golden Day paraphrased itself in my mind. Bread and wine, your cross ain't nearly so heavy as mine. Okay? So, shout out to Geosphere. He says, how to improve my English. Well, I'm an English teacher. If you're looking for English classes, send me an email. We can organize for me to be teaching you individually in private one-on-one lessons online. Other than that, you could also try to read some books, which is what we are doing on this live stream. We are reading books. Possibly something that is not something you do. I assume, Geosphere, you do not read books. You're not a reader, so that's probably why you struggle with English. But let's continue here. And the nuns rode on with lowered heads. I looked at the boys. They sat as formally as they walked. From time to time, one of them would look at his reflection in the window and give his hat brim a snap, and the others watching him silently, communicating ironically with their eyes, then looking straight ahead. I staggered with the lunging of the train, feeling the overhead fans driving the hot air down upon me. What was I in relation to the boys, I wondered. Perhaps an accident, like Douglas. Perhaps each 100 years or so, men like them, like Douglas, appeared. Sorry, where was I? Sorry. I staggered with the lunging of the train. I looked at the boys. They sat as formally as they walked. From time to time, one of them would look at his reflection in the window and give his hat brim a snap. The others watching him silently, communicating ironically with their eyes, then looking straight ahead. I staggered with the lunging of the train, feeling the overhead fans driving the hot air down upon me. What was I in relation to the boys, I wondered. Perhaps an accident, like Douglas. Perhaps each 100 years or so, men like them, like me, appeared in society, drifting through, and yet by all historical logic, I should have disappeared around the first part of the 19th century, rationalized out of existence. Perhaps like them, I was a throwback, a small distant meteorite that died several hundred years ago, and now lived only by virtue of the light that speeds through space at too great a pace to realize that its source has become a piece of lead. This was silly, such thoughts. I looked at the boys. One tapped another on the knee, and I saw him remove 3 rolled magazines from an inner pocket, passing 2 around and keeping one for himself. The others took theirs silently and began to read in complete absorption. One held his magazine high before his face, and for an instant I saw a vivid scene. The shining rails, the fire hydrant, the fallen policeman, the diving birds, and in the mid-ground Clifton, crumpling. Then I saw the cover of a comic book and thought Clifton would have known them better than I. He knew them all the time. I studied them closely until they left the train, their shoulders rocking, their heavy heel plates clicking, remote, cryptic messages in the brief silence of the train's stop. So, shout out to Jay is Gay. Should they lower the age of consent? No, absolutely not. You are sick. You are absolutely sick, Jay is Gay. Please don't make me put you in timeout. You seem like a sick person. Okay. All right, so let's go here. This section of the book I find to be very interesting. It's very deep and profound. I could go on like an hour's worth of ranting just about this. What I am interpreting, though, from Brother Clifton's death is that Clifton, in the mind of the main protagonist, who's unnamed, the guy that we're following throughout this story, represented a type of blackness that was more authentic and true to form, simply because Clifton was like dark skinned, but also because Clifton was from Harlem, if I remember right. Clifton was in the community deep before our main character showed up, and Clifton mysteriously left the Brotherhood and ends up selling, caricatures, negative caricatures of black people on the street, and then is gunned down violently by the police right in front, right? There's a lot to understand there, but what I'm getting from that is that our main character felt disassociated from some element of blackness in and of itself. And this time he feels sad that he's disassociated from it. Not in the same way he was disassociated from the black southern bourgeoisie elite that Dr. Bledsoe represented, but this type of, I guess, urban black ghetto cool that has become the number 1 export recognized as cool on other people in other countries, is essentially copy and paste black American, right? Whether that be drill in the UK or whatever they're doing in Paris or France or Switzerland, whatever, anywhere in the world where you see people dressed as cool, they're emulating. He was alienated from that because he had spent a lot of his life just trying to climb the white corporate ladder. In this case, the ladder of, and also trying to be one of those bougie Negroes that look down on these Southern blacks, you know what I mean? And here he is in New York, watching his brother just get executed in the street, and then seeing these young black men, walk with swagger and confidence, even though they're living in a world that is hostile to their very existence. It's profoundly moving. You know what I mean? It's profoundly moving. There's also one more thing I gotta say about this section, is that, he talks a lot about history, right? And how, the Brotherhood, aka the communists, believe that history is sort of dictated by dialectical materialism. The movement of oppositional forces and the class struggle in particular move history forward, right? And scientifically, we can predict where history will go because of the contradictions within our own society, right? And here he sort of turns it up on his head because he sees these young black men living and existing in a world that has totally dehumanized them, asserting their own humanity by pressing forward with their bold fashion choices of wearing the zoot suits, right? And these guys probably never heard of communism, socialism, the Brotherhood, revolution, liberation, anything like that. But yet and still, they are a part of history. They are moving history forward. And so this is the opposite view of history. Us socialists, us Marxists, us communists believe history is scientific, but what if history is just a gambler? What if history up in the live stream, who is actually paying attention to what I'm saying, actually engaged with the text, and actually has something to say about what I'm saying, rather than wanting to hear themselves being heard. This is a channel to be educated and to discuss great literature, black life, anti-blackness, leftist politics, not just to be heard for yourself. Okay? If you want to just be heard by yourself, just go back to Bangladesh, go back to India, go back to Southeast Asia, okay, where y'all can just rant and rabble in your sandals and flip-flops, okay? We're here having highbrow discussions, okay? But let's continue here. So, I came out of the subway, weak, moving through the heat as though I carried a heavy stone, the weight of a mountain on my shoulders. My new shoes hurt my feet. Now, moving through the crowds along 125th Street, I was painfully aware of other men dressed like the boys, and of girls in dark exotic colored stockings, their costumes surreal variations of downtown styles. They'd been there all along, but somehow I'd missed them. I'd missed them even when my work had been most successful. They were outside the groove of history, and it was my job to get them in, all of them. I looked into the design of their faces, hardly a one that was unlike someone I'd known down south. Forgotten names sang through my head like forgotten scenes in dreams. I moved with the crowd, the sweat pouring off me, listening to the grinding roar of traffic, the growing sound of a record shop loudspeaker blaring a languid blues. I stopped. Was this all that would be recorded? Was this the only true history of the times? A mood blared by trumpets, trombones, saxophones, and drums, a song with turgid, inadequate words? My mind flowed. It was as though in this short block I was forced to walk past everyone I'd ever known, and no one would smile or call my name. No one fixed in my eyes. No one fixed me in his eyes. I walked in feverish isolation. Near the corner, now a couple of boys darted out of the 5 and 10 with handfuls of candy bars, dropping them along the walks as they ran, with a man right behind. They came toward me, pumping past, and I killed an impulse to trip the man, and was confused all the more when an old woman standing further along threw out her leg and swung a heavy bag. The man went down, sliding across the walk as she shook her head in triumph. A pressure of guilt came over me. I stood on the edge of the walk, watching the crowd threatening to attack the man, until a policeman appeared and dispersed them. And although I knew no one could do much about it, I felt responsible. All our work had been very little. No great change had been made, and it was all my fault. I'd been so fascinated by the motion that I'd forgotten to measure what it was bringing forth. I'd been asleep, dreaming. Wow. That was a very... Dog, I might cry, bro. That is a profound chapter. Oh, this is absolutely profound writing. Excellent writing. Okay? That was absolutely fantastic. I love that chapter so much. So well written. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. Shout out to Lucien Lachette 9635. Lucien Lachette, salute to you. Shout out to Geosphere up in the chat, leaving comments as well. And yeah, it's going to be excellent. It's going to be excellent, man. I love this. That is a profound chapter, bro. I mean, the disillusionment. Disillusionment is always sad. You know, when you feel like something that you've believed in, dedicated your life to, something that you thought would make you and the world a better place, turns out to be, ineffective, or even worse, harmful to the actual goals that you had in mind. That is one of the worst feelings. And I've been disillusioned several times in my life with several things, right? Yeah, that feeling of like dedicating your life to something and then seeing it all work out, or not work out, is very bad. Okay. All right. So Geosphere is going in timeout because this is not the channel for name calling. You know, I take anti-blackness, I take racism, I take all of these things very seriously. I know in your war-torn, God-forsaken country, that is a hellhole on earth, you all just throw out names that mean nothing. But I am from a place, and I represent a people where words actually mean something. And or we're not just going to tolerate just, name calling like that. So you will get blocked. You put on timeout until you actually read something. Okay? Geosphere is going on timeout until he reads something. Until he actually learns how to read. Okay? I'm putting my time, my work, my energy in to educate the people, to bring light to the masses, and yet instill You come from a place where everybody is musty, dirty, with walking around in flip-flops, chopping each other with machetes. And here I am, trying my best to bring some light into this world. You disgust me, sir. Go away. Be gone. You are banished to the nether realm, okay? Yeah, anybody else? You got something to say? Say it with your chest. We're going to come back here. Chapter 21. This will be the last chapter we read today. Then we're going to call it a day. Let's go. When I got back to the district, a small group of youth members stopped their joking to welcome me. But I couldn't break the news. I went through to the office with only a nod, shutting the door upon their voices, and sat staring out through the trees. The once fresh green of the trees was dark and drying now, and somewhere down below a clothesline peddler clanged his bell and called. Then, as I fought against it, the scene came back, not of the death, but of the dolls. Why had I lost my head and sat and spat upon the doll, I wondered. What had Clifton felt when he saw me? He must have hated me behind his spiel, yet he'd ignored me. Yes, and been amused by my political stupidity. I had blown up and acted personally instead of denouncing the significance of the dolls, him, the obscene idea, and seizing the opportunity to educate the crowd. We lost no opportunity to educate, and I had failed. All I'd done was to make them laugh all the louder. I had aided and abetted social backwardness. The scene changed. He lay in the sun, and this time I saw a trail of smoke left by a sky-riding plane, lingering in the sky. A large woman in a Kelly green dress stood near me, saying, "Oh, oh." Okay? Oh. Oh my gosh. It's killing me, man, right now, just being sick. But I'm doing this for the people, man. We're doing this for the people, man. We coming outside. We doing the work. We reading the text. We feeling all the feels. We feeling all the feels and putting in the work. Let's go. I turned and faced the map, removing the doll from my pocket and tossing it upon the desk. My stomach surged. To die for such a thing. I picked it up with an unclean feeling, looking at the frilled paper. The joined cardboard feet hung down, pulling the paper legs in elastic folds, a construction of tissue, cardboard, and glue. And yet I felt a hatred as for something alive. What had made it seem to dance? The fingers outlined in orange paint, and I noticed that it had two faces, one on either side of the disc of cardboard, and both grinning. Clifton's voice came to me as he spilled his directions for making it dance, and I held it by the feet and stretched its neck, seeing it crumple and slide forward. I tried again, turning its other face around. It gave a tired bounce, shook itself, and fell in a heap. "Go on, entertain me," I said, giving it a stretch. "You entertain the crowd." I turned it around. One face grinned as broadly as the other. It had grinned back at Clifton as it grinned forward at the crowd, and their entertainment had been his death. It still had grinned when I played the tool and spat upon it, and it was still grinning when Clifton ignored me. Then I saw a fine black thread and pulled it from the trailed paper. There was a loop tied in the end. I slipped it over my finger and stood stretching it taut, and this time it danced. Clifton had been making it dance all the time, and the black thread had been invisible. Why didn't you hit him? I asked myself. Tried to break. Why didn't you hit him? I asked myself. Tried to break his jaw. Why didn't you hurt him and save him? You might have started a fight, and both of you would have been arrested with no shooting. But why had he resisted the cop anyway? He'd been arrested before. He knew how far to go with the cop. What had the cop said to make him angry enough to lose his head? And suddenly it occurred to me that he might have been angry before he resisted, before he'd even seen the cop. My breath became short. I felt myself go weak. What if he believed I'd sold out? It was a sickening thought. I sat holding myself as though I might break. For a moment I weighed the idea, but it was too big for me. I could only accept responsibility for the living, not for the dead. My mind backed away from the notion. The incident was political. I looked at the doll, thinking, the political equivalent of such entertainment is death. But that's too broad a definition. It's economic meaning. That's the light of a man that's the light of a man is worth the sale of a 2-bit paper doll. But that didn't kill the idea that my anger helped speed him on to death. And still my mind fought against it. For what had I to do with this crisis that had broken his integrity? What had I to do with his selling the dolls in the first place? And finally, I had to give that up too. I was no detective, and politically, individuals were without meaning. The shooting was all that was left of him now. Clifton had chosen to plunge out of history, and, except for the picture it made in my mind's eye, only the plunge was recorded, and that was the only important thing. You know, these questions he's asking himself, like, you know, why did my friend have to die? Why did I have to see him die right in front of me? Like, I never had anybody die in front of me, but a good friend of mine, George Anthony Wade Jr., passed away in around, 2016. He took his own life after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think about him often, and I often blame myself, too, for his departure, because he texted me right before he took his own life. And there were several times when he had called me before, but I was either too busy with work or I was doing something, or, you know what I mean? I was just in my own zone. And I always think about that. Like, why did you decide to do that? You know what I mean? And that's very common, I guess, when you lose somebody who's close to you, to sort of like blame yourself or look at yourself as the fault, you know? So, I don't know. It's just very, once again, very hurtful, very relatable. And God, this book is getting me emotional. You know a book is good when it can like pull on your heartstrings like this. I did not expect chapters 20 and 21 to be so damn deep. Because chapter 19 was funny. He was getting some coochie. He was getting coochie. He was smacking that booty, smacking up the pog. And now here we are, the homie died. And we blaming ourselves. Pour out a little liquor. Pour out a little liquor for the homie. Anyway. I sat rigid, as though waiting to hear the explosions again, fighting against the weight that seemed to pull me down. I heard the clothesline peddler's bell. What would I tell the committee when the newspaper accounts were out? To hell with them. How would I explain the dolls? But why should I say anything? What could we do to fight back? That was my worry. The bell tolled again in the yard below. I looked at the doll. I could think of no justification for Clifton's having sold the rolls, but there was justification enough for giving him a public funeral, and I seized upon the idea now as though it would save my life, even though I wanted to turn away from it, and I wanted to turn from Clifton's crumpled body on the walk. But the odds against us were too great for such weakness. We had to use every politically effective weapon against them. Clifton understood that. He had to be buried, and I knew of no relatives. Someone had to see that he was placed on the ground. Yes, the dolls were obscene, and his act a betrayal. But he was only a salesman, not the inventor, and it was necessary that we make it known that the meaning of his death was greater than the incident or the object that caused it, both as a means of avenging him and of preventing other such deaths. Yes, and of attracting lost members back into the ranks. It would be ruthless, but a ruthlessness in the interest of brotherhood. For we had only our minds and bodies, as against the other side's vast power. We had to make the most of what we had, for they had the power to use a paper doll, first to destroy his integrity, then as an excuse for killing him. All right, so we'll use his funeral to put his integrity together again. For that's all that he had or wanted. And now I could see the doll only vaguely, and drops of moisture were thudding down upon its absorbent paper. All right, interesting. Very interesting. All right, continuing here. I was bent over, staring, when the knock came at the door, and I jumped as at a shot, sweeping the doll into my pocket, and hastily wiping my eyes. Come in, I said. The door opened slowly. A group of youth members crowded forward, their faces a question. The girls were crying. Is it true, they said, that he is dead? Yes, I said, looking among them. Yes. But why? It was a case of provocation and murder, I said, my emotions beginning to turn to anger. They stood there, their faces questioning me. He's dead, a girl said, her voice without conviction. Dead. But what do they mean about his selling dolls? A tall youth said. I don't know, I said. I only know that he was shot down, unarmed. I know how you feel. I saw him fall. Take me home, a girl screamed. Take me home. I stepped forward and caught her, a little brown thing in bobby socks, holding her against me. No, we can't go home, I said. None of us. We've got to fight. I'd like to get out into the air and forget it, if I ever could. What we want is not tears but anger. We must remember now that we are fighters, and in such incidents we must see the meaning of our struggle. We must strike back. I want each of you to round up all the members you can. We've got to make our reply. One of the girls was still crying piteously when they went out, but they were moving quickly. Come on, Shirley, they said, taking the girl from my shoulder. I tried to get in touch with headquarters, but again I was unable to reach anyone. I called the Chthonian, but there was no answer. So I called a committee of the district's leading members, and we moved slowly ahead on our own. I tried to find the youth who was with Clifton, but he had disappeared. Members were set on the streets with cans to solicit funds for his burial. A committee of 3 old women went to the morgue to claim his body. We distributed black-bordered leaflets denouncing the police commissioner. Preachers were notified to have their congregations send letters of protest to the mayor. The story spread. A photograph of Clifton was sent to the Negro papers and published. People were stirred and angry. Street meetings were organized and released by the action from my indecision. I threw everything I had into organizing the funeral, though moving in a kind of numb suspension. I didn't go to bed for 2 days and nights, but caught cat naps at my desk. I ate very little. The funeral was arranged to attract the largest number. Instead of holding it in a church or chapel, we selected Mount Morris Park, and an appeal went out for all former members to join the funeral march. It took place on a Saturday in the heat of the afternoon. There was a thin overcast of clouds, and hundreds of people formed for the procession. I went around giving orders and encouragement in a feverish daze, and yet seeming to observe it all from off to one side. Brothers and sisters turned up whom I hadn't seen since my return, and members from downtown and outlying districts. I watched them with surprise as they gathered and wondered at the depths of their sorrow as the lines began to form. There were half-draped flags and black banners. There were black-bordered signs that read, Brother Tod Clifton, Our Hope Shot Down. There was a hired drum corps with a crepe-draped drums. There was a band of 30 pieces. There were no cars and very few flowers. It was a slow procession, and the band played sad, romantic, military marches. And when the band was silent, the drum corps beat the time on drums with muffled heads. It was hot and explosive, and delivery men avoided the district, and the police details were increased in number. And up and down the streets, people looked out of their apartment windows, and men and boys stood on the roofs in the thin-veiled sun. I marched at the head with the old community leaders. It was a slow march, and as I looked back from time to time, I could see young zoot suitors, hep cats, and men in overalls and pool hall gamblers stepping into the procession. Men came out of barber shops with lathered faces, their neckcloths hanging, to watch and comment in hushed voices. And I wondered, are they all Clifton's friends, or is it just for the spectacle? The slow-paced music? A hot wind blew from behind me, bringing the sick Swedish odor, like the smell of some female dogs in season. I looked back. The sun shone down on a mass of unbared heads, and above flags and banners and shining horns, I could see the cheap gray coffin moving high upon the shoulders of Clifton's tallest companions, who from time to time shifted it smoothly on to others. They bore him high, and they bore him proudly, and there was an angry sadness in their eyes. The coffin floated like a heavily loaded ship in a channel, winding its way slowly above the bowed and submerged heads. I could hear the steady rolling of the drums with muffled snares, and all other sounds were suspended in silence. Behind the tramp of feet ahead, the crowds lining the curbs for blocks. There were tears and muffled sobs and many hard red eyes. We moved ahead. We wound through the poorest streets at first, a black image of sorrow, then turned into 7th Avenue and down and over to Lenox. Then I hurried with the leading brothers to the park in a cab. A brother in the park department had opened the lookout tower, and a crude platform of planks and ranked sawhorses had been erected beneath the black iron bell. And when the procession started into the park, we were standing high above, waiting. At our signal, he struck the bell, and I could feel my eardrums throbbing with the old, hollow, gut-vibrant doom-dong-doom. Looking down, I could see them winding upward in a mass to the muffled sound of the drums. Children stopped their playing on the grass to stare, and nurses at the nearby hospital came out on the roof to watch, their white uniforms glowing in the now unveiled sun like lilies. And crowds approached the park from all directions. The muffled drums now beating, now steadily rolling, spread a dead silence upon the air, a prayer towards the unknown soldier. And looking down, I felt a lostness. Why were they here? Why had they found us? Because they knew Clifton, or for the occasion his death gave them to express their protestations, a time and place to come together, to stand touching and sweating, and breathing and looking in common direction. Was either explanation adequate in itself? Did it signify love or politicized hate? And could politics ever be an expression of love? Over the park, the silence spread from the slow, muffled rolling of the drums, the crunching of footsteps on the walks. Then somewhere in the procession, an old, plaintive, masculine voice arose in a song, wavering, stumbling in the silence at first alone, until in the band a euphonium horn fumbled for the key and took up the air, one catching and rising above the other, and the other pursuing. Two black pigeons rising above a skull-white barn to tumble and rise through still blue air. And for a few bars, the pure sweet tone of the horn and the old man's husky baritone sang a duet in the hot, heavy silence. There's many a thousand gone. And standing high up over the park, something fought in my throat. It was a song from the past of the campus, and the still earlier past of home. And now some of the older ones in the mass were joining in. I hadn't thought of it as a march before, but now they were marching to a slow-paced rhythm, up the hill. I looked for the euphonium player and saw a slender black man with his face turned toward the sun, singing through the upturned bells of the horn, and several yards behind, marching beside the young men, floating the coffin upward. I looked into the face of the old man who had aroused the song and felt a twinge of envy. It was a worn old yellow face, and his eyes were closed, and I could see a knife welt around his upturned neck as his throat threw out the song. He sang with his whole body, phrasing each verse as naturally as he walked, his voice rising above all the others, blending with that of the lucid horn. It would be dope if the same man he's seeing in this funeral procession were the same old man that he saw at the beginning of the book, who told him, boy, I know you got the blues in you, when he first made it to New York and he had no money. And now here our main character is leading a funeral procession with, like, it seems hundreds of people marching behind him. Anyway, I continue. I watched him, now wet-eyed, the sun hot upon my head, and I felt a wonder at the singing mass. It was as though the song had been there all the time, and he knew it and aroused it, and I knew that I had known it too, and had failed to release it out of vague, nameless shame or fear. Datalore.2 says, you love jazz? I have a question for you. I love supreme. What's up? I love supreme. I love supreme. What is that? What is that? Tell me. Anyway. Continuing here. And I knew that I had known it too and failed to release it out of a vague, nameless shame or fear. But he had known it and aroused it. Even white brothers and sisters were joining in. I looked into that face, trying to plumb its secret, but it told me nothing. I looked at the coffin and the marchers, listening to them, and yet realizing that I was listening to something within myself. And for a second I heard the shattering stroke of my heart. Something deep had shaken the crowd, and the old man and the man with the horn had done it. They had touched upon something deeper than protest or religion. Though now images of all the church meetings of my life welled up within me with much suppressed and forgotten anger. But that was past, and not too many of those now reaching the top of the mountain and spreading massed together had never shared it. and some had been born in other lands, and yet all were touched. The song had aroused us all. It was not the words, for they were all the same, old slave-born words. It was as though he changed the emotion beneath the words, while yet the old longing, resigned, transcendent emotion still sounded above, now deepened by that something for which the theory of brotherhood had given me no name. I stood there trying to contain it as they brought Tod Clifton's coffin into the tower and slowly up the spiral stairs. They set it down upon the platform, and I looked at the shape of the cheap gray coffin, and all I could remember was the sound of his name. The song had ended. Now the top of the little mountain bristled with banners, horns, and uplifted faces. I could look straight down 5th Avenue to 125th Street, where policemen were lined behind an array of hot dog wagons and good humor carts. And among the carts I saw a peanut butter vendor standing beneath a street lamp upon which pigeons were gathered. And now I saw him stretch out his arms with his palms turned upward, and suddenly he was covered, head, shoulders, and outflung arms, with fluttering, feasting birds. All right. So, shout out to Funds Minded Prodigy joining the live stream. I appreciate you, Funds Minded Prodigy, joining the live stream. Salute to you. All right. Shout out to James Wright. Yes, we are still reading Invisible Man. We only have about 4 more chapters to go in Invisible Man, so we will be finishing it in about the next 2 episodes. Invisible Man will probably end in episode 17 or 18. I can't predict. But we're nearing the end of chapter 21, so if you have any comments that you want to say, put it in the comment section and we will get to it, okay? Anyway, we're at this point in the story, James writes, where a brother was murdered unjustly by the police officer. Our main character is feeling disillusioned with the Brotherhood because, they have sort of betrayed him. Our main character also got some coochie from a big booty pog, and now he seems to be transforming again. It seems like he's coming to his own self-realization, even though others did not see him for who he was or who he could be. Anyway. Picking up here in our story. Let's go here. So, someone nudged me and I started. It was time for final words, but I had no words and I'd never been to a Brotherhood funeral and had no idea of a ritual. But they were waiting. I stood there alone. There was no microphone to support me, only the coffin before me upon the backs of its wobbly carpenter's horses. I looked down into their sun-swept faces, digging for the words and feeling a futility about it all and in anger. For this they gathered by thousands. What were they waiting to hear? Why had they come? For what reason that was different from that which had made the red-cheeked boy thrill at Clifton's falling to the earth? What did they want and what could they do? Why hadn't they come when they could have stopped it all? Okay. What are you waiting to tell me to you? What are you waiting for me to tell you? I shouted suddenly, my voice strangely crisp on the windless air. What good will it do? What if I say that this isn't a funeral, but it's a holiday celebration? That if you stick around, the band will end up playing Damn It, the Hell, the Fun's All Over? Or do you expect to see some magic? The dead rise up and walk again. Go home. He's as dead as he'll ever be. And that's the end in the beginning, and there's no encore. There'll be no miracles. There's no one here to preach a sermon. Go home. Forget him. He's inside this box, newly dead. Go home and don't think about him. He's dead, and you've got all you can to do to think about you. I paused. They were whispering and looking upward. Okay. That's wild to shout that at somebody's funeral. Shout out to James Wright. He says he's glad the main character got some coochie because he was going through a rough time. I was happy too. Yes, we were very happy when he finally got to smack something. But he's now going through the problems of his homie dying. Now the homie dies. It's like menace to society. Anyway. I've told you to go home, I shouted, but you keep standing there. Don't you know it's hot out here in the sun? So what if you wait for what little I can tell you? Can I say in 20 minutes what was building 21 years and ended in 20 seconds? What are you waiting for? When all I can tell you is his name. And when I tell you, what will you know that you didn't know already, except perhaps his name? They were listening intently, and as though looking not at me, but at the pattern of my voice upon the air. All right, you do the listening in the sun, and I'll try to tell you in the sun. Then you go home and forget it. Forget it. His name was Clifton, and they shot him down. His name was Clifton, and he was tall, and some folks thought him handsome. And though he didn't believe it, I think he was. His name was Clifton, and his face was black, and his hair was thick with tight rolled curls, or call them naps or kinks. He's dead, uninterested, and except to a few young girls, it doesn't matter. Have you got it? Can you see him? Think of your brother or your cousin John. His lips were thick with an upward curve at the corners. He often smiled. He had good eyes and a pair of fast hands, and he had a heart. He thought about things, and he felt deeply. I won't call him noble, because what's such a word to do with one of us? His name was Clifton, Tod Clifton, and like any man, he was born of a woman to live a while and fall and die. So that's his the minute. His name was Clifton, and for a while he lived among us and aroused a few hopes in the young manhood of man. And we who knew him loved him, and he died. So why are you waiting? You've heard it all. Why wait more when all I can do is repeat it? They stood, they listened, they gave no sign. Very well, so I'll tell you. His name was Clifton, and he was young, and he was a leader. And when he fell, there was a hole in the heel of his sock. And when he stretched forward, he seemed not as tall as when he stood. So he died, and we who loved him are gathered here to mourn him. It's as simple as that, and as short as that. His name was Clifton, and he was black, and they shot him. Isn't that enough to tell? Isn't it all you need to know? Isn't that enough to appease your thirst for drama and send you home to sleep it off? Go take a drink and forget it, or read it in the daily news. His name was Clifton, and they shot him, and I was there to see him fall. So I know it as I know it. Here are the facts. He was standing and he fell. He fell and he kneeled. He kneeled and he bled. He bled and he died. He tell in a heap like any man, and his blood spilled out like any blood, red as any blood, wet as any blood, and the reflecting sky, and the buildings and birds and trees, or your face if you'd looked into its dulling mirror, and it dried in the sun as blood dries. That's all. They spilled his blood and he bled. They cut him down and he died. The blood flowed on the walk in a pool, gleamed a while, and, after a while, became dull, then dusty, then dried. That's the story, and that's how it ended. It's an old story, and there's been too much blood to excite you. Besides, it's only important when it fills the veins of a living man. Aren't you tired of such stories? Aren't you sick of the blood? Then, why listen? Why don't you go? It's hot out here. There's the odor of the embalming fluid. The beer is cold in the taverns. The saxophones will be mellow at the Savoy. Plenty good laughing lies will be told in the barber shops and beauty parlors. And there'll be sermons in 200 churches in the cool of the evening. And plenty of laughs at the movies. Go listen to Amos and Andy and forget it. Here you have only the same old story. There's not even a young wife up here in red to mourn him. There's nothing here to pity, no one to break down and shout. Nothing to give you that good old frightened feeling. The story's too short and too simple. His name was Clifton, Tod Clifton. He was unarmed, and his death was as senseless as his life was futile. He had struggled for brotherhood on 100 street corners, and he thought it would make him more human. But he died like any dog in a road. Damn. Damn. All right, I called out, feeling desperate. It wasn't the way I wanted it to go. It wasn't political. Brother Jack probably wouldn't approve of it all, but I had to keep going as I could. Listen to me standing up on this so-called mountain, I shouted. Let me tell it as it truly was. His name was Tod Clifton, and he was full of illusions. He thought he was a man when he was only Tod Clifton. He was shot for a simple mistake of judgment, and he bled, and his blood dried, and shortly the crowd trampled out the stains. It was a normal mistake of which many are guilty. He thought he was a man, and that men were not meant to be pushed around. But it was hot downtown, and he forgot his history. He forgot the time and the place. He lost his hold on reality. There was a cop and a waiting audience, but he was Tod Clifton, and cops are everywhere. The cop, what about him? He was a cop, a good citizen, but this cop had an itching finger and an eager ear for a word that rhymed with trigger, and when Clifton fell, he had found it. The police special spoke its lines, and the rhyme was completed. Just look around you. Look at what he made. Look inside you and feel his awful power. It was perfectly natural. The blood ran like blood in a comic book killing, on a comic book street, in a comic book town, on a comic book day, in a comic book world. All right, wa alaikum salam to Abdullah Musa. Salute to you for joining the live stream. Tod Clifton's won with the ages, but what's that to do with you in this heat, under this veiled sun? Now he's part of history, and he has received his true freedom. Didn't they scribble his name on a standardized pad? His race, colored, religion, unknown, probably born Baptist, place of birth, U.S., some southern town, next of kin, unknown, address, unknown, occupation, unemployed, cause of death, be specific, resisting reality in the form of a .38 caliber revolver in the hands of the arresting officer on 42nd between the library and the subway in the heat of the afternoon, of gunshot wounds received from 3 bullets fired at 3 paces, 1 bullet entering the right ventricular of the heart and lodging there, the other severing the spinal ganglia, traveling downward to lodge in the pelvis, the other breaking through the back and traveling God knows where. Such was the short, bitter life of Brother Tod Clifton. Now he's in this box with the bolts tightened down. He's in the box and we're in there with him. And when I've told you this, you can go. It's dark in this box and it's crowded. It has a cracked ceiling and a clogged up toilet in the hall. It has rats and roaches and it's far, far too expansive a dwelling. The air is bad and it'll be cold this winter. Tod Clifton is crowded and he needs the room. Tell them to get out the box. That's what he would say if you could hear him. Tell them to get out the box and go teach the cops to forget that rhyme. Tell them to teach them what they call you N-I, hard R, to make a rhyme with trigger. It makes the gun backfire. Tell them to teach them that when they call you the hard R to make a rhyme with trigger, it makes the gun backfire. All right. Shout out to Little Miss Meow. Shout out to Little Miss Meow joining the live stream. And shout out to Abdullah Musa. We're reading one of the saddest parts of Invisible Man. Our main character is giving the eulogy, a very powerful, painful, biting, sarcastic eulogy at his friend's funeral after his friend was murdered unjustly by the police. Continuing here in the story. So there you have it. In a few hours. All right, so there you have it. In a few hours, Tod Clifton will be cold bones in the ground. And don't be fooled, for these bones shall not rise again. You and I will still be in the box. I don't know if Tod Clifton had a soul. I only know the ache that I feel in my heart, my sense of loss. I don't know if you have a soul. I only know you are men of flesh and blood, and that blood will spill and flesh grow cold. I do not know if all cops are poets, but I know that all cops carry guns with triggers. And I know, too, how we are labeled. So in the name of Brother Clifton, beware of the triggers. Go home, keep cool, stay safe away from the sun. Forget him. When he was alive, he was our hope. But why worry over a hope that's dead? So there's only one thing left to tell, and I've already told it. His name was Tod Clifton. He believed in brotherhood. He aroused our hopes, and he died. I couldn't go on. Below they were waiting, hands and handkerchiefs shading their eyes. A preacher stepped up and read something out of his Bible, and I stood looking at the crowd with a sense of failure. I had let it get away from me, had been unable to bring in the political issues, and they stood there sunbeaten and sweat-bathed, listening to me repeat what was known. Now the preacher had finished, and someone signaled the bandmaster, and there was solemn music as the pallbearers carried the coffin down the spiraling stairs. The crowd stood still as we walked slowly through. I could feel the bigness of it and the unknownness of it and pent-up tension, whether of tears or anger, I couldn't tell. But as we walked through and down the hill to the hearse, I could feel it. The crowd sweated and throbbed, and though it was silent, there were many things directed toward me through its eyes. And the curb were the hearse and a few cars, and in a few minutes they were loaded, and the crowd was still standing, looking on as we carried Tod Clifton away. And as I took one last look, I saw not a crowd, but the set faces of individuals, men and women. We drove away, and when the cars stopped moving, there was a grave, and we placed him in it. The gravediggers sweated heavily and knew their business, and their brogue was Irish. They filled the grave quickly, and we left. Tod Clifton was underground. I returned through the streets as tired as though I dug the grave myself. I felt confused and listless moving through the crowds and seemed to boil along in a kind of mist, as though the thin humid clouds had thickened and settled directly above our heads. I wanted to go somewhere, to some cool place to rest without thinking. But there was still too much to be done. Plans had to be made. The crowd's emotions had to be organized. I crept along, walking a southern walk in a southern weather, closing my eyes from time to time against the dazzling reds, yellows, and greens of cheap sports shirts and summer dresses. The crowd boiled, sweated, heaved, women with shopping bags, men with highly polished shoes. Even down south, they'd always shine their shoes. Shined shoes, shoed shines, it rang ahead. On 8th Avenue, the market carts were parked hub to hub along the curb, improvised canopies shading the withering fruits and vegetables. I could smell the stench of decaying cabbage. A watermelon huckster stood in the shade beside his truck, holding up a long slice of orange-mealed melon, crying his wares with hoarse appeals to nostalgia, memories of childhood, green shade and summer coolness. Oranges, coconuts, and alligator pears lay in neat piles on little tables. I passed, winding my way through the slowly moving crowd. Stale and wilted, flowers rejected downtown, blazed feverishly on a cart, like glamorous rags festering beneath a futile spray from a punctured fruit juice can. The crowd were boiling figures, seen through steaming glass from inside a washing machine. And in the streets, the mounted police detail stood looking on, their eyes noncommittal beneath the short polished visors of their caps, their bodies slanting forward, reins slacking alert, men and horses of flesh initiating men and horses of stone. Tod Clifton's Tod, I thought. The huckster cried above the traffic sounds, and I seemed to hear them from a distance, unsure of what they said. In a side street, children with warped tricycles were parading along the walk, carrying one of the signs. Brother Tod Clifton, our hope shot down. And through the haze, again, I felt the tension. There was no denying it. It was there, and something had to be done before it simmered away in the heat. So that's the end of chapter 21. So we just finished chapters 20 and 21. Once again, the book is about 25 chapters. We're going to be reading chapters 22 and 23 tomorrow at least. Hopefully I will be less sick. Hopefully I will be less sick tomorrow. But hopefully you enjoyed this live stream, and I hope you enjoyed it. Kraken Tamil says, "Are you a pastor?" No. I am a Muslim. Muslims do not have pastors. There are no Muslim pastors, okay? What else? Okay? All right. Let's see. All right. Let's see. What else is here? All right. We're going to put this person in timeout. Okay? We're going to close the polls right now. Okay, we're going to close the polls right now and see what people think. Okay, so when it comes to the poll, what would you rather have? Money, power, respect, or fame? 60% voted respect, 20% voted money, 20% voted fame. 20% voted power, and 0% voted fame. I like those poll results. That's good. Let's see what the results are in the vertical live. Let's see the results in the vertical live. What we talking about? If you want to vote, you better vote now. Okay? Vote now. Okay. Who's the greatest leftist streamer? Okay. I really like these results. These are powerful results. Damn. Overwhelmingly. Is Hassan. Who is the greatest leftist streamer? 78% said Hassan, 10% said FD, 6% said Vash, and 6% said Destiny. Damn. Damn, shout out to Hassan. He is the fucking truth. I love Hassan so much, and I'm glad y'all like him too. For real, for real. That was hard. But yeah, shout out to Kraken. Kraken, please look at the descriptions of our videos. Please peruse the channel so you know what this channel is about. Please don't come on here, just making stupid questions. But yes, I am a revert. I am a revert to Islam. And Imam only has one M. Imam only has one M in the English spelling. Okay, but I know English is a second or third or fourth or 17th language for some of you. Either way, come on this channel and recognize that it's an English channel and it's an educational channel too. Okay? All right. We're going to wrap up this live stream. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for bearing with me during my illness. And catch you tomorrow. Peace.